3, 2, 1.
Gil Amminadav, welcome to Breakdown.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
BrightLeaf.info, that's the services website. Digital.brightleaf.info, that's where you'll find the Asana Gravity Forms add-on. We're going to get there, I promise. But first, let's just talk. We were talking before we hit record. You're saying, hey, before I joined the BrightLeaf team, and I was using Gravity Forms for a decade, and I really wanted to bring this team into a sort of Gravity Forms first thinking method. Like, we know Gravity Forms, I think most people listening to this podcast know that Gravity Forms goes beyond a contact form. But what does that mean to you? And actually, more importantly, what does that mean for an agency owner? Like that, what I'll call like an insurance policy almost. Like, you can slot Gravity Forms in because you know it's a trusted solution and that the team will sort of back it up. And I also promise this is not going to be just a pure Gravity Forms ad. But what is that Gravity Forms first forward thinking for you?
Sure, that's a great question. So basically, Gravity Forms first, or Gravity first, is just basically whenever we're looking to add functionality or to achieve some kind of delivery of a service, before we look outside of the Gravity Forms ecosystem, we first try to see if there is a way to leverage the tools that the Gravity Forms ecosystem provides, whether it's input, output, display, automation, whatever it is, to achieve that solution. And so, with the messenger service, which you mentioned before, and which we just launched over the past few months, and we actually just made an improvement to it over this past week. So that was something where there is a front end messenger service for WordPress out there, but our whole point is we're using Gravity Forms. We want everything to link into our system, which is a Gravity Forms based system, from the CRM to the applications to the contracts to every record, and I can explain more about how deeply we go with Gravity Forms. But basically, we're already bought into the system. So let's use the tools that are here because they're really wonderful tools. And as I mentioned before we hit record, basically the end result is basically like a web app. We're taking something which is basically, originally intended, it was a contact form. But then once you're breaking down everything into, data in, data out, display, trigger automation, trigger workflow, once you're talking about that, you're talking about a web app. I mean, I've built forms which are all hidden fields, and it's just the submit button, and that's basically a button that does something. On the other hand, I've built forms which are all fields and no submit button, and that's where you're getting functionality based on populate anything or whatever tool you want to use to deliver something. So basically, with the tools that are available to us, we've found that with a Gravity first mindset, we can build anything we need. From messaging to referral programs to obviously application processing, but even more, we do fund management and all kinds of financial stuff with Gravity Forms, and we've really found that adopting a Gravity first mindset not only pushes us to be more creative, but it also has been just rewarding because we've kept everything together. And so now the same tools that we're using, the same teams we're interacting with, support teams and product development teams, all that kind of stuff, it's all the same people. So we have that continuity. And as far as from a business owner's perspective, one of the biggest selling points that I had was that with Gravity Forms, it's all in the system. All the data is there. You never lose a piece of data unless you choose to delete it, and then you have to click delete, and then they say you want to confirm the delete, and then it's the whole thing, right? So you never lose any data, and from a business owner's perspective, that's wonderful. So if as I mentioned too, we had previously, before I got on, everything was distributed across the Google Suite, and there was third-party automation platforms involved, and data was here and data was there. It was across 20 different sheets and all this kind of stuff. With the Gravity first approach, we've consolidated everything into one system that uses the Gravity Forms ecosystem to take in information, to display information, to process information, and then to do all kinds of fun stuff like throw webhooks and send tasks to Asana and do whatever it is. So we enjoy pushing the envelope with a Gravity first mentality. What can you actually do with Gravity Forms?
Sounds like we should raise the price. No, I'm just kidding.
We'll pay. I mean, it's good.
What I also heard there was a certain level of efficiencies and scalability. I ran an agency for a decade, and Gravity Forms was at the core of literally 99% of the sites that we built, from the mom and pop shop that just needed a contact form to, I remember building a pretty complex pricing calculator for a popular wedding magazine in our area, where vendors could come in, they could put their prices for different, aspects of a wedding, and then the end user visitor to the website could go through this, save the form as if they were building a price sheet. And I remember at the time, like, wow, this is something that makes my life as an agency owner, not a developer, but as an agency owner, I see those efficiencies and I see that scalability. In other words, if my developers were to leave me, because we had a rotating crew or a young agency, getting people, going to college, leaving college, et cetera, if from a scalability, like, I knew that this engine that powered these solutions was something that somebody could reverse engineer, understand. It wasn't somebody's super custom code that was like, oh my God, that developer's not here. What do we do now? So there was a level of like insurance and efficiencies there. That's my perspective. Do you kind of share that same perspective, or do you have a different angle on it?
100% I share that perspective, and that was also a big selling point in the sense that we're working with no code developing. If you take your browser screen right now, that's fields. That's fields on a screen. Right? You could have a mini browser going on with Gravity Forms and, embed whatever you need to embed and have this here and have that there. And you could basically have a no-code software. And that was something that, from my boss's perspective, who's a very, he's a tech-savvy guy. He's not a developer. I'm not a developer. We're not programmers. We have a programmer on the team to do code snippets when we need to, and to do the plugin, right? But, we don't, it's not like he or I are particularly conversant in PHP, but the fact is that you can reverse engineer it, you can understand it. It's where knowledge can be distributed across the team. We have team members that live and work in the Philippines, and they're able to be brought in onto the same wavelength that the rest of us are, without this huge curve of going through a computer science degree and the whole thing. And at the same time, when you're talking about efficiency, with using a Gravity Forms first approach, we're able to build the system that meets our needs, and this is what we do for clients as well, for our nonprofit clients, where we build their system that meets their needs. And you can't get more efficient than that. If you have a custom built scalable system that is nothing extra for you, it's just, this is what you need in order to run your organization, that's something that every administrator and every business owner can immediately latch onto and say that this is no fat, no pork, this is just what I need. And that's something that we found internally, and we found that sharing the Gravity Forms ecosystem with our clients has delivered similar results. So I totally buy into what you're saying, that it's there's inherent organizational efficiency when you're using a toolkit like Gravity Forms.
So originally found your the BrightLeaf story from the Gravity Wiz team in their Spotlight series. I'll link up the article in the show notes of this podcast. One of the subtitles of this article is One-on-One Messaging Using Gravity Forms. Help paint the picture. You use Gravity Forms as a way to communicate with clients, and it's what I'll call a messaging system. You'll fill in the blanks, but a messaging system, and it sort of gives your team the sort of the bespoke features that no other maybe CRM is going to give you, and it gives your customers a unique, more intimate way to communicate, and it's dialed in for your set of customers. Is that a fair assessment? And what is the one-on-one messaging system that you've built?
Yeah, no, I'd say that's a fair assessment, and basically, I won't go into the technical details until you give me the go-ahead. I don't want to bore our listeners, but basically, what we achieved with the messaging system is a way for us to directly communicate with our clients in a way that is contextually relevant for us, and also has all of the conversational history in one place. And in order to do that, we had to just basically think about what is communication. What is really, when you open up your messenger on your phone, what are you really doing? What are you really interacting with in terms of user experience? And then when that data is stored and then subsequently displayed, what's really going on there? Meaning, what is a messaging system if not just like a bulletin board where only certain messages are visible to certain people, right? So when you put something like it in those terms, then Gravity Forms really presents itself as like a natural solution. And one of the things I was really thrilled about when we finally just hit it was that like this is a simple solution that anyone can implement. With something like Gravity Forms, the powerful engine, as you put it, like Gravity Forms, you can very simply implement messaging. And the improvement I mentioned before the show that we had just deployed this week is we actually now turned it into we added a broadcast element to it as well. Meaning not only can we do one-to-one messaging, which is very important because that gives us, again, the conversational history. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I was actually, as part of giving that contextually relevant conversation history, I actually embedded a Gravity view in a Gravity form.
This is Inception all over again.
It's total Inception. Using live merge tags to filter the Gravity view so it's relevant to what you're seeing on that form. You can do amazing things. But basically, this past week we added a broadcast element to it, where basically it's the same simple principles. Where if things are filtered by usernames, right? So then just change the username, make a username for the user role, and then filter it by the user role. Okay, so we needed to code a little custom snippet so the user role merge tag plays nice, fine. So we got our developer to do a nice custom snippet, and we put that on our GitHub repository, and everyone else can download that and implement it for themselves. And we hope that everyone does. But basically, that's the idea behind the messaging system. It's a great way to consolidate client communication. It's a great way for people to know what's the, a guaranteed way. Like if you tried to reach us through, the 1,000 emails we're processing or whatever the case may be, we will get back to you as soon as we can, but that might be tomorrow, it might be in 2 days, you get some kind of response, but it's not going to be like, if you get through us to the messaging system, well, there's always team members monitoring the messaging system, working with the, fulfilling the workflow, that kind of stuff. And this direct clients know the best way to reach us is through this. This puts it right in front of our faces. We use Gravity Flow to put it in the My Tasks inbox on the front end, and we just got total visibility now in all client communications. Nothing gets lost, and you can even play with it more. I mean, it's a simple thing to implement that people can really have fun with it. If you in someone's use case, they want to have files uploaded, as part of that, and have files available in the conversation history, fine. Add in a file field. Add in a file upload field. Now you've got files as part of your conversation history. There's so much you can do with that. But one of the things I love about this ecosystem, and I really want to say this community, is that these ideas don't emerge in a vacuum. And even though this was something we've been working on for months, I first got into my head like it'd be really nice if we could have the messaging, and I got hung up on a technical aspect of it, and I was trying to figure out how we could have threaded conversations and whatever, there was a dead end. But seeing the highlight in the Gravity Wiz publication that was like, oh, someone else was doing a client portal. Oh, let me think about the client portal. That's really one-to-one. It's not something we're going to have a broadcast thing. You don't really need threaded messages, the whole thing. Oh, it's even better if you have everything there together. One thing follows another, and we can really build on what each other is doing to achieve some really great stuff. So a lot of the spirit that's motivating us in BrightLeaf, in our sharing and giving back to the community, is that we really want to see a vibrant Gravity Forms community where people are developing wild stuff, cutting edge stuff with Gravity Forms, sharing the results with each other and saying, here's how you do it. Because so far it's blown our minds what you can do with Gravity Forms.
You mentioned no code before. I mean, that's a direction that, let's say, I mean, you could argue all of WordPress is headed, right, with like core Gutenberg blocks and be able to move information around a screen. And then I'm sure as they mature the like query block functionality, you really start to empower end users who can't write a PHP MySQL query to display content. They'll be able to do it right in their WordPress dashboard. And Gravity Forms ecosystem has those same capabilities through Gravity Kit. Gravity Wiz has a entries display add-on as well. All of that is getting to, from that no-code perspective, how do you manage the front end of this solution? Do you have a theme you turn to that says this is actually a WordPress theme that is, hey, this is great for displaying this dynamic content? Or is that last mile for you where you say, okay, I pull in a front-end designer to, write the template, create the templates and lay out the data the way that we need it to look?
That's a great question. Especially since we have yet to pull in a real graphic designer. We've been pinch hitting on our team for those kinds of things. I'll tell you, there's two elements to your question. there's the no code aspect, and then there's the question of what is the learning curve required to actually design with, Gravity View, let's say, in its current state. It would be great if the UX on a Gravity View or on a Gravity form allowed more styling. That would be, that would make my boss thrilled. If anyone's listening, that'd make my boss thrilled. But just from anyone's perspective, it's easier to, type in a number and move a sliding bar, on a parameter than it is to figure out the ID and figure out the code and figure out, what it is that you actually have to specify. That said, we do all of our design through CSS. We use GeneratePress as our theme. Bare basics. I'm not saying our sites are going to win any awards for visual design, but they look good. They look sleek. The user experience, especially on the dashboard side, the client portal side, is very, very good. And we found that the documentation that is offered for IDs, classes, and elements through Gravity View and through Gravity Forms, and the ability to add custom CSS classes, we make good use of that stuff. Now I should point out, there is something called styles and layouts for Gravity Forms, which we also use, and that's more of a UI for styling forms. So like that kind of stuff, my boss loves playing with that, and setting the border on this field like that much, and then putting that thing. It looks good. I'm not, I have no judgment in this kind of thing, so I just care about the functionality of it. But even that said, it's amazing just with a basic list view in Gravity View, the list view type, and then how all of the elements are given, and here's all their classes, and here we can just call it very specifically, okay, set the border for this, set the radius for that, give me that color, pull it from here. It all works so well. And the fact that there's so many opportunities to add in the custom CSS, on the view level, or like I said, as a class, then define the class through the customizer or whatever it is. It's something where you don't really need, if you have a theme that works for you, great. I'm confident that Gravity Forms works with everything, so that's fine. But the truth is that CSS isn't hard. I think we all remember the days on GeoCities when it was just all HTML and you were typing in, set the background color to blue, but now it's, all through whatever it is. And, CSS, the limited amount of CSS that you need to have in order to run that extra mile with Gravity Forms is totally attainable, I think, for most basic web developers. In this day and age, it's doable. That said, would it be great if there was a UX for it? Absolutely. If there's a UI, but, you don't need it.
I want to get to the Asana for Gravity Forms plugin in a second, but one last question about this messaging platform. How do you manage, and this might be one of the maybe speed bumps along the way, but how do you manage iterating on these, what I'll call like these little mini web apps, these little mini SaaS apps that you're building with Gravity Forms? How do you iterate on that and, let's say, roll back a version or abstract like hard-coded functionality to what Gravity Forms gives you? Like, are you constantly making version 1 of a Gravity Form, and then version 2 comes out, you hide version 1 and launch version 2 and launch version 2 in there? Like, how do you manage that sort of typical workflow that you might have with a GitHub deployment workflow? But now it's like, oh, these are little forms that we can just plop right onto a page. How do you manage iterating on that software?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's different approaches to that. There's Gravity Connect. Mm-hmm. There's UA put out a plugin for managing forms across sites and that kind of stuff, and so that's one direction you could go in. We take a little more by the seat of your pants approach that is, by the same time, limited by certain operational constraints. We can't actually deploy multiple versions of a form entirely, because that would screw with our data tables, our database. We're treating these forms like tables themselves. So unless we just copied all the entries from one form to the next and then mapped those and figured out, what values had to be filled in, we'd be at a disadvantage. So when we iterate, we do so thoughtfully. We test everything that we're trying to do externally on other forms first. Like, I have 15 different test forms which are at different stages of testing functionality and seeing how we can really. And when it comes to planning out the iterations, because really, the plan is half the battle here, we actually use a sprint process. So just like we have the sprint process for the plugin itself, we have a sprint process for our service deployment, and for everything down to like the confirmation message is ironed out ahead of time, and that saves us a lot of headache afterwards trying to figure out what went wrong. Now, that said, there is a certain kind of, when you're flowing in the experience of building anything, digital, physical, whatever it is, you come in with a plan and you come in with a set of this is how it's going to go, and then things just happen. It turns out one feature doesn't work exactly the way you planned or even tested, and there's now some new factor that's at play. Or it turns out that, you can go up, you can have a workflow that covers steps A, B, C, but then in between steps A and B, you realize, oh my God, we need to have a second step there. We didn't see it, or it was caused by the fact that we need to split this value across two fields, and now we have to choose which field we're going with. But whatever the case is, there's a certain amount of, okay, it's a work in development, it's a work in progress, and so when you get into the development, you come into the best of plan, and still you have to make tweaks along the way. So then it's just a question of making sure that your master template reflects, what are those changes you made. And we actually use a handy Gravity Wiz snippet for field admin notes, where you can put in admin notes on the field level in the form builder, and that just helps us to keep track of, why are some very crazily configured fields configured that way. There is a rhyme and there is a reason, and it allows us to handle that. But before we jump into the plugin, actually, I wanted to share something else that we're doing, if you don't mind, which is another direction which we've taken Gravity Forms, and was actually kind of the groundwork for the messaging system. Because the messaging system, if you think about it, is basically a type of ledger. And the ledger approach to Gravity Forms is something that we've done a lot with. We manage a lot of finances for our clients, through different bank accounts and different organizations and this kind of stuff. And we have an internal record of all of their funds, all of their incoming funds, all of their accumulated funds, and all of their dispersed funds. All of that is run through Gravity Forms. We use Gravity Math, we use Gravity Views, we use Gravity Forms, obviously, for the manage the UI and all that kind of stuff. But we're actually by thinking in terms of in and out ledger transactions. Here's an entry that's this type, here's an entry that's that type. You just line them all up. We're actually able to manage a sizable amount of funds, very cleanly, very easily. Everyone sees exactly what's coming in, what's projected to come in but has yet to be confirmed through Gravity Flow, what has been, projected to go out but has yet to be approved. We get totals, you can filter the totals by dates, and there's all kinds of stuff. And it's all done through Gravity Forms. We're basically setting up, an internal accounting system. It's not double entry. You could do double entry with Gravity Forms or take an extra database table or two, but we're actually able to do it. And so it was that ledger thinking, in terms of a ledger of transactions, a Gravity Form. We have for our funds and our accounts, we have, the actual application for the fund, which is like how the user interacts with it, the client interacts with their fund on the client portal. And then we have like dispersal forms, okay, and then we have incoming third-party funds, okay, but then we also just have a ledger. We have a pure ledger for every type of service that we do, and that's just tracking in and out. And once you think, now a ledger is such a simple thing. Everyone's like, okay, what's the big deal? What's about a ledger? But that's like the wheel. It changes the ballgame. Now we're talking about a whole different level of accounting, and we have aims at, by the way, about building out all business services through a Gravity Form site. I mean, we think that there's nothing that can be done that a business needs to do that can't be done through a properly equipped, properly outfitted Gravity Form site. So that's just one last point I just wanted to share before we talk about the plugin. But whether it's messaging, whether it's referral program, whether it's account management and fund management, Gravity Forms has provided solutions every step along the way, and it's amazing what you can do with these tools. Simply amazing.
I paused there because that's going to be the sound bite that I take for the Super Bowl ad when we actually air it one day. There's one other thing I wanted to jump into before we get to the Asana plugin. There's a great, and I don't know if maybe you already use it, but I just featured this. I think it was like last week or maybe it was this week. I can't remember. Gravity Kit has their Gravity Revisions add-on, which is fantastic because then it allows you to see see the revisions of, hey, you add a field in, and all of a sudden that's a new revision of Gravity Forms, of the Gravity form itself, right? So anyone listening to this and maybe not doing something as complex as the messaging app, if you're just making minor adjustments and you're working with a group of people on a WordPress website, that is another fantastic plugin that'll show you those changes. Okay, so Asana, you use that internally to track projects. Is this really the bigger question in terms of the Gravity Forms ecosystem? I'm looking at the website. Again, it's digital.brightleaf.info. You'll see the little integrate Asana with Gravity Forms link up top. You can download a free version. You can download a premium version. Are we going to see more premium add-ons? Is this the first foray into becoming a certified developer in the Gravity Forms ecosystem?
Oh, it would be an honor. So basically we develop everything in-house first for internal use. That's our initial criterion, is that, we didn't get into the business of being, Gravity Forms developers. We have a consulting business, and we're just trying to be smart about how we go about it. That said, we do some pretty gnarly stuff with code. Through our GitHub repository, like I mentioned before, has the snippets that we put out there in terms of just tweaking this, tweaking that to deliver 10 times more functionality with the Gravity Forms tools that are there. And then that extra mile, when we come across something that, like the Asana plugin, there was an Asana plugin years ago that just, when Asana switched their authentication system and they went to OAuth and everything, like that plugin wasn't maintained as much and everything, and it stopped functioning. And so basically, there was nothing out there. We had a need for this, and we figured we can't be the only ones. There's plenty of people using Gravity Forms, plenty of people using Asana, and it's such an important thing for project management. It's getting back to, client portals and, the whole workflow process of onboarding clients and delivering services to them and all that kind of stuff. Asana is a big part of that. Gravity Forms is great. It's not going to replace a project management suite anytime soon, although that's something to think about. But, right now, Asana meets a lot of needs that, Gravity Forms is not there to fill. So when it comes to integrating the two, that should have been a no-brainer for, that for us was just like, we need just immediately to build this bridge. So the bridge actually from Gravity Forms end was very easy to build. From the Asana end was much more difficult. Again, I was not the lead developer on the project. I'm not a developer. We took our lead developer. We're taking him out to dinner to congratulate him on his first, real plugin, and for getting into the directory, into the Gravity Forms certified. But the Gravity Forms document.
Hold off on that dinner until he has to actually answer support tickets from customers.
Right. Right. Well, no, he's a good guy. I'm confident in him. I'm very confident in him. No, we're looking forward to seeing what problems people come up with, and also, give us some good direction in terms of how we want to continue developing the UX and, developing features and, figuring out what are the most efficient ways to code this plugin. But once we put it out there, we realize that this is the kind of thing where, this is a good spin-off for us to get into, meaning that this is a good, it grows naturally and organically from our internal operations. We have the resources to deliver on this. Let's take the best of what we're working with and we're developing internally, go that extra mile to add the extra features for a wide user base and then a premium level, and then just see what happens with that.
It's been a fantastic conversation. I really obviously enjoyed everything that you had to say about building out these platforms, the forward-thinking Gravity Forms concept for the agency. Once again, I'll reiterate the URLs, brightleaf.info and digital.brightleaf.info if you want to check out that Gravity Forms. Gil, anything else that you want to add as a resource for folks in the community? Are you doing anything on the community side, like, I don't know, Gravity Forms meetups, or where do you coalesce on the web to talk about Gravity Forms in your world?
First of all, we're trying, we make good use of the informational resources out there, including what's on, the sites, as well as like the Facebook groups. Those are pretty lively and dynamic. We're also trying to organize, actually, here in Jerusalem, we're trying to organize a countrywide WordPress developers, maybe hopefully build a little piece in the area. I don't know if you've been following the news, but it's a little hairy right now, and we're trying to bring groups together, Israeli, Palestinian, and maybe come together around WordPress and around the Gravity Forums banner or something like that. But yeah, we're pretty active in that, and we're trying to give back. We're going to start a blog soon that explains all the gaps that we found in the Gravity Forums documentation. If we find any specific techniques like the messaging system, we want to share those with the community and contribute those to the conversation. And look forward to seeing everyone on Facebook, because those groups are invaluable.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Gil, thanks for hanging out today. That's it for today's episode. If you could do one more thing for me today, share this episode on social media, your favorite Facebook group or Discord channel. Spread the word about this podcast. It really helps. If you haven't added Breakdown to your favorite podcast app, point your browser to gravityforums.com/breakdown and click the icon of your app to add us and listen to us every 2 weeks. Okay, we'll see you in the next episode.